Spa. So in terms of the championship coming into the weekend, it is the Emil Frey Racing Lamborghini of Albert Costa and Giacomo Altoe that's right at the front of our picture that leads the championship ahead of teammates Michael Grenier and Norbert Seidler. And there is the 63 championship leading car, Albert Costa at the wheel for this qualifying session. He and Altoe have been in the points every single race this year, whereas teammates Grenier and Seidler have won on 2 occasions. The other race winners beside the Emil Frey Racing Lamborghini being Fran Rueda and Andres Saravia in race 1 at Hockenheim, as we go in car with one of the Antonelli Motorsport Mercedes. Pick out which of the Antonelli Mercedes that is in the moment. I think it is Daniel Zampieri, who has got a new co-driver this weekend in the form of Michael Meadows, that car being involved in a massive incident early on in race 1 in Hockenheim a fortnight ago. It's Janine Hill at the wheel of the Get Speed Performance Mercedes that made its seasonal debut in the International GT Open at Hockenheim, and a couple of AM class podiums, the reward for Janine Hill and co-pilot John Schaffner's efforts from the weekend. The car at the front of our pitch, though, the Tempest Racing Fro, was the pace setter yesterday in free practice. It's Christopher Froggatt who is at the wheel of the car for this first qualifying session of the weekend. So 30 minutes to play with, a long lap. The teams can afford to let strategy come to the fore a little bit during the course of this session. The weather, as ever here at Spa, possibility of being somewhat changeable. Yesterday was extremely windy, particularly during the course of the afternoon. So here is Albert Costa, the championship leader for Emil Frey Racing, who pushed very hard for his second victory of the season late on in Hockenheim, but teammate Grenier was not to be overhauled, and so it is Costa who will be hoping to start from pole position, or rather it's Giacomo Altoe who is out in this session rather than Albert Costa, and Altoe currently 10th overall. It's Alberto Di Folco who has set the fastest outlap of the session. Everybody on their first lap to get up to pace at the moment. They all run, of course, in the control compound Michelin tyre, and it will take them a couple of laps to warm up the tyre before then they can really start to push for a time. Another new entry to the championship this weekend is the return of Imperiale Racing, and now Lamborghini in the hands of Patrick Qualy and Adrian Amstutz, and it's Patrick Qualy, another graduate from single-seater racing, who will be the wheel of that car for the session as Altoe arrives into the bus stop chicane, navigates the corner, championship leader, without too much drama, and accelerates through over the line, and that's a 2 minute 17.435 for Giacomo Altoe, which is quite the fastest time of the session. Well, it is the fastest time of the session now that we've had the quickest time removed for us. Michael Grenier's teammate has then gone through and gone into second as a brace of Mercedes into Les Combes. The number 9 car is Davide Roda, and he is just ahead of the Sports and New Mercedes of Antonio Coimbra. So the two of the AM class front runners on the brakes, picking their way down through the Bruxelles hairpin. They are being pursued by one of the Imperiale Racing Lamborghinis. Blue flags being waved as Patrick Qualy goes fastest for Imperiale Racing, a 2 minute 16.052. So the Finnish driver going very, very rapidly straight out of the box. As Coimbra moves aside, and that allows Nicholas Pola to pass. His next target is Davide Roda. Roda, who had a troubled time in qualifying in Hockenheim, bringing out the red flag. Hopefully the same won't occur on this occasion. Now here, meanwhile, is Michael Grenier, twice a race winner this season for Emil Frey Racing. And Grenier, it's typically been the case this year, doing the Saturday qualifying session. So the pursuit terms track position of Fran Rueda, one of the trio of Theo Martin Motorsport McLarens. Grenier has got reasonably clear track. The driver is really flying though. As you can see at the bottom of your picture is Patrick Qualy, who has come out of the blocks very, very rapidly for Imperiale Racing. Through Blanchimont there for Grenier. And this is going to be his best lap of the session. Looking likely to be a mid 2 minute 16 second lap, provided no dramas at the bus stop chicane. He accelerates through and across the line, and it's 2 minutes 16.7 for him. There was a flash of green that was Patrick Qualy, but as you can see, he's caught behind the HTP Motorsport Mercedes. It's Alexander Raquina at the wheel, and so Qualy backs right out of that lap, trying to build himself as much clear air as possible for his next tour of the circuit. Accelerates on his way now then, and he has got clear track ahead of him. Giacomo Toei then second in the session. Oh, and that's a huge instant, and that is Jietong Liang at the top of Radion. And Liang, he's had a troubled season so far, a big crash in race 1 in Hockenheim, and another big crash in this qualifying session. Appears to be a thumbs up from the marshal. You can just see a little bit of movement there inside the cockpit. Not unsurprisingly, the red flag comes out, the 1/3 point of the session. And that, if nothing else, I'm sure would have given the driver quite a fright. Very, very fast section of circuit to be going off the road. Here is what happened, and he lost it early on and crunches into the tyre barrier, which does its job, absorbs the energy of the incident. The safety cell of the Lamborghini doing exactly what it needed to do as well, but a very disappointing start to the weekend for Jietong Liang and the Raton Racing by Target car. Not surprisingly, they're going to take their time to make sure that he is absolutely okay before they start to think about moving the Lamborghini. So a third of the way through the session is Patrick Qualy, who is quickest, half a second clear then of Giacomo Altoe. And there you see Liang just jumping into the back of the medical car. He will take him for checking the medical sense. That's Rafael Gia Maria in the middle of your picture, who is the other driver of the number 19 car. So here's another look at it, and the incident happening well before he arrived into Radion, and the tyre wall almost seems to eat up the Lamborghini. And this is how the end of the incident would have looked from the Antonelli Motorsport Mercedes. But unusual to see the car completely spinning around that early on in the sequence of corners, and then a really, really big impact into the tyre wall. So there is the Marcello Hahn piloted Theo Martin Motorsport McLaren. A new co-driver, of course, for Marcello Hahn this weekend, with Alain Coder busy elsewhere. It is Ben Barnicoat, who is one of McLaren's factory GT racers, who partners Hahn this weekend in the Pro-Am class, but it's the Brazilian who's taken to the track for the qualifying session. He's currently in 20th place. So all busy in the pit lane. There is Valentin Pierberg at the wheel of the SPS Automotive Mercedes, and his co-driver Tom Onslow-Cole confers in the cockpit. And passing on, I think that the lap prior to the red flag coming out for Valentin Pierberg had been a very, very good one. If we can string that together again, then that will, they will hope, see a big elevation up the order. So there's the Daniel Zampieri, Michael Meadows, Antonelli Motorsport Mercedes. Zampieri at the wheel for this session. Michael Grenier at the wheel of Frey Racing Lamborghini. And Marcello Hahn is certainly taking his time and getting back to the pits in the Teo Martin Motorsport McLaren. And hopefully that's not a signal of any sort of issue with the car, but rather he just wants to take absolutely no chances whatsoever in heading back to the pit lane for Maurizio Cristani at the wheel of the sister SPS Automotive Mercedes. Cristani and Ramos. Miguel Ramos, a very established pairing, making the switch to the Mercedes this year, and currently 9th in the session, but having had a reasonably good start to the season as well. 4th in the championship standings for Cristani and Ramos. Achieva the 3rd. He and Christopher Froggatt well up in the Pro-Am class, and spectacular through the Hockenheim weekend. Najee Razak and Federico Leo conferring the Ombra Racing Lamborghini. It's Razak, the Malaysian, at the wheel for the session, as the instant for Jiatong Liang nearing completion in terms of the retrieval of the car. The pit lane will open in a couple of minutes' time, and still Marcello Hahn continues to tour back to the pits. Meanwhile, Fran Rueda talking to an engineer on the radio. Currently 5th overall for Rueda in the Teo Martin Motorsport McLaren. He and Andres Saravia, first victory of the season, a really nicely judged race in Hockenheim to take that win. Perfectly letting the strategy play out. All fairly relaxed as well then for Patrick Qualy, the current pole sitter in the session. No tyres on the Imperiale Racing Lamborghini. And they've still got 2/3 of the session to run, of course, when we resume in about 90 seconds' time. Martin Kodric, the spectacular Croatian driver for Teo Martin Motorsport, particularly in Paul Ricard, he was absolutely flying. He's currently 6th in the session. He and his Portuguese co-pilot Enrique Chavez currently 3rd in the championship, 11 points off the championship lead. Well, there was Fabio Anidi in Hockenheim a fortnight ago who had a wretched start to the weekend, a reasonably hefty incident for him towards the end of the first qualifying session, unfortunately enough to eliminate he and Elizo Martinez from proceedings in Germany. So they'll be hoping for fewer dramas this time around. Frederick Schandorf, Kang Ling in the Vincenzo Sperry Racing Lamborghini. Schandorf and Ling shone very brightly in Hockenheim. In the AM class, though, it was Konrad and Traquin who had a brilliant weekend in Germany. Possibly it was the guidance of Bernd Schneider in the HTP Motorsport pit that was of assistance. And that car would appear to be being wheeled back into the garage. And hopefully that is not a problem for Quina and Conrad, who were double AM class victors 2 weeks ago. So the session has resumed, the clock continuing then to tick onwards. Still got 2/3 of the session to run. And the squadron of Antonelli Motorsport Mercedes looking ready to rejoin the fray. And that is the car of Giuseppe Cipriani accelerating to the track. So the pit lane steadily emptying as the drivers rejoin the circuit, while we have had the pause in proceedings. The cloud cover has rather come over the start and finish and pit section of the circuit. Actually, though, further down the track in sunshine, the driver who is yet to resume is Nicholas Pola. There's an adjustment there to the rear wing of Fran Rueda's McLaren. So we'll find out exactly what the issue is as the TMRT Motorsport mechanics get to work. But clearly some adjustments underway as Nicholas Pola accelerates down the pit lane to rejoin the action. He's just behind Janine Hill in the Get Speed Mercedes. But an incentive for the cars to head out onto the track fairly rapidly is that they can only warm up their tyres until the first car has crossed the line, which has happened now, which means that Davide Roda has to stop weaving and now start to focus on the job at hand. So he turns through Fania. Marcello Hahn out on track, headlights ablaze as well for Janine Hill. She has got Nicholas Pola just behind, as we saw from Pola's perspective. As the rear wing judders on the Lazarus Lamborghini under heavy braking into Les Combes. The Spa circuit, one that the drivers really relish. Chance to open up the throttle, but also a track where overtaking is possible at so many different points around the circuit. As Pola slides to the inside of the Mercedes into the Bruxelles hairpin. And that gives him reasonably clear air to then start to pick up the pace over the course of this outlap. Cross line meanwhile for Fabio Onidi. And he has got the benefit of clear track ahead of him now. Currently 11th in the standings, 2 minutes 18.1. His best lap of the session. As he plunges downhill in towards Eau Rouge, then the climb up towards Radion. All under control from Onidi. So he then accelerates onto the Kemmel Straight and needs to carry all that speed through the steep uphill because it's about a kilometre down the Kemmel Straight. The camera angle and the zoom makes it appear a little bit shorter than it actually is, but it's a really long blast. If you lose time at the top of the hill, it punishes you down that stretch of circuit, through Les Combes and then running downhill towards the Bruxelles hairpin. So imagine this lap for Onidi is probably still one that is focused on just getting the Michelin tyre up to the temperature that he wants it to be, and then he can really kick on and start to build his pace probably from the next lap. We're approaching the halfway point in the session. So with 30 minutes to play with, and most runs taking about 10 minutes or thereabouts by the time that they've got some warmth into the tyres and then done 2 or 3 flying laps, the teams can try and wait for a little bit of a break in the traffic. And certainly a lot of the pace setters from early on in the session doing exactly that. Of the top 10 at the moment in the standings, we've got 7 of them still in the pit lane. And Fabio Onidi's got a completely empty circuit here. This lap, however, not an improvement on his best thus far. Here's Valentin Pierberg. Pierberg alongside Tom Onslow-Cole, the reigning Pro-Am class champions, back to defend their champion title this year. Although coming into the weekend, they lead by just 2 points in the Pro-Am Championship. But with Duncan Cameron and Matt Griffin having to be late no-shows, they have got a chance to build a little bit of a buffer in that Pro-Am Championship lead as work on going on the Sports New Mercedes. Here's Alberto Di Folco in the remaining Raton by Target Lamborghini. And Di Folco has been very quick over a single lap so far this season. Currently in 4th position in the session, but a good first sector. Runs out a little bit wide though through the left-hander. Another driver who's going well through the first sector is this man, Edward Cheever. And Cheever, he's got Naji Razak just ahead of him. But he and Christopher Froggatt, again, looking for opportunity to gain a fair chunk of ground in the Pro-Am Championship this weekend. .34 second adrift of Qualy's mark through Sector 1. I don't think the turbulent air from Razak's going to affect Cheever, particularly in the Tempesta Racing Ferrari. He's coming towards the end of the second sector now as he comes out of the Cours Paul Frere and then begins the long blast towards Blanchimont. And in fact, he's lost almost a second through the middle sector, so that is unlikely to be an improvement for him. But post-red flag, we're now starting to see some of the pace winding up a little bit. Alberto Di Folco comes past us, goes third, a 2 minutes 16.5 for Di Folco, as Cheever abandons the lap, peels into the pit lane. Meanwhile, here is Nicholas Pola, and Pola, his last lap was his best of the session, good enough to elevate the Team Lazarus Lamborghini up into 9th position overall. Daniel Zampieri, another driver who's on a good lap at the moment in the Antonelli Motorsport Mercedes. Here comes Marcello Hahn then, currently 21st overall. And he's being pursued by Janine Hill. But Hahn up on himself through the first sector. Zampieri completes his lap, then he goes 10th in the Antonelli Motorsport Mercedes. Nicholas Pola coming towards the end of the second sector. It's reasonably slim pickings at the moment, actually, in terms of drivers who are improving, but Alberto Di Folco is pressing on in the Lamborghini. It's this almost minute-long middle sector of the lap, which is really the one which determines whether or not the driver is on course for an improvement. As Di Folco navigates Fagnes. Still a lot of the front runners in the session remaining in the pit lane. And Di Folco up a little bit through the middle sector. Provisional pole, 2/3 of the way around the lap, by 36 thousandths of a second. Once more, the tiniest of margins through Blanchimont, using every millimetre of the road, but no more than that for Alberto Di Folco. As he now accelerates into the braking zone, the nose of the car dips. He slows it, he tips down through the gears. The Lamborghini blasts then out of the final turn, across the line for Alberto Di Folco, and he does go quickest, a 2 minutes 15.895 for Alberto Di Folco. So he moves into provisional pole position with 11.5 minutes remaining, but Fabrizio Crostani may have an answer to Di Folco, because Crostani was a 10th faster than his compatriot through the first sector. The SPS Automotive Mercedes then, Crostani dances on the brakes, uses all the traction into Fagnes. Nicholas Pola, another driver who is going strongly now through the first sector. With a third of the session remaining now, we are starting to see the expected front runners emerging onto the circuit. But this, at the moment, is looking likely to be a very good lap for Fabrizio Crostani. Based on his current pace, we're looking at something like a 2 minutes 15.4, 2 minutes 15.5, depending what happens through the final sector. So on the brakes then for Fabrizio Crostani. Picks his way through the chicane. So then the short sprint towards the timing line. He comes over the line past us and takes pole position, but in the event only by 51 thousandths of a second from Alberto Di Folco. Nicholas Pola, who had been on a good lap, backing right out of it, so he does not make an improvement. has got clear road ahead of him to wind up for another shot at it. There in the background there you see Patrick Qualy, who was quickest before the red flag, and he is beginning to warm his tyres and look to push in the Imperiale Racing Lamborghini. So almost the whole field now out on circuit. And this is where we're going to start to see the flurry of times coming in. As Pola blasts out of Radion onto the Kemmel Straight. Martin Kodrich on a good lap in the Teo Martin Motorsport McLaren was 9th overall. He is into the final sector of the lap now. And if nothing else, that looks likely to be Kodrich's best. Patrick Qualy, meanwhile, quicker than anybody through Sector 1. Fabrizio Cristani also still on a good lap as Martin Kodrich comes past us, goes 5th. So the order is Cristani from DeFalco, Patrick Qualy, who we watch now into the Bruxelles hairpin, Chiva in 4th, Kodrich in 5th, Altoe in 6th, Pola 7th, Grenier 8th, Rueda 9th, and Schandorf in 10th. That, though, is all likely to switch fairly quickly, I'd suggest. Qualy navigates Pouhon without too much drama. His next target being Nicolas Pola. Hopefully for him, Pola won't provide any distraction. I don't think he should do. We've got, Kenny Harble, who's gone off, though, on the exit of Fagnes. Finds reverse gear. Doesn't possibly want to do a blind reversal on this track. I'd suggest he finds a forward gear, which he does. Gets back underway. Now, Qualy, that cost him a bit of time, seeing the stricken Mercedes. He's still up a little bit. On his best lap of the session, but he's not now on a pole position schedule. That yellow flag also affected Chiva as well, but Chiva was on an outlap, so not quite as profoundly as Qualy, who accelerates through the bus stop chicane, accelerates on over the line then, and Qualy does go quickest at 2 minutes 15.770. So he now goes faster by 74 thousandths a second. Here's the moment for Kenny Harble, who was extraordinarily fortunate there. Somehow he didn't clatter into either tyre barrier, because that could have been a couple of millimetres either way. A very, very big instant for Harble. Now here is Fran Rueda in the Teo Martin Motorsport McLaren. Rueda currently in 10th place. Teammate Kodrich is in 6th. He's just been demoted by Frederick Schandorf, popping up to 5th for Vincenzo Sospiri Racing. And Rueda, on schedule for his best lap of the session, has got Schandorf pursuing him, but it is unlikely to be one that's particularly going to challenge for pole position at the moment. It's Mikael Grenier has gone 5th, meanwhile, for Emil Frey Racing. As Rueda picks his way through the chicane. Over the line for Fran Rueda. Schandorf improves behind him with his pace in 6th. Rueda remains in 10th, but that was his best lap of the session. So it's Qualy from Cristani, then Alberto Di Folco, Chiva in 4th, Grenier in 5th, Schandorf 6th, Kodrich 7th, Giacomo Altoe in 8th, Nicolas Pola 9th. Fran Rueda rounds out the top 10. Patrick Qualy, running in the Pro-Am class, seems to have the legs over everybody thus far in the session, with 5 3/4 minutes to run. This lap unlikely to be an improvement for Qualy. It's pole position margin over Fabrizio Cristani, just 74 thousandths of a second, and then it's a further 500ths of a second back to DeFalco in 3rd. And then the gap about 3/10 of a second to Chiva in 4th. So that's where there is ground to make up for some of his rivals. As Qualy picks his way out of the chicane, acceleration over the line, and no improvement, but still a lap that would have been good enough for 4th on the grid nonetheless. Now here's Mikael Grenier, who is on schedule to put together his best lap of the session, although already almost 2/10 adrift through the first couple of sectors. Grenier likely to only move up here, I would say, to 4th place, which has just become occupied by teammate Giacomo Altoe. Michael Grenier navigates the bus stop chicane. Comes past the commentary box and goes 4th at 2 minutes 15.9, and in the end, just 0.174 adrift through the final sector, as both Patrick Qualy and Fabrizio Cristani are on good laps now. We're with Cristani. And it's through this middle sector where Fabrizio Cristani seems to be particularly strong. He's got teammate Valentin Pierberg running on the road ahead of him. And we've got a gaggle of cars all going very, very quickly at the moment inside the top 10. But Patrick Qualy seems to have absolutely phenomenal speed through the first sector. He's 2/10 up on everybody. Consistently strong through the speed trap, and Cristani, well, his lap goes no further. 2.6 seconds adrift to where he would want to be through the middle sector, so that's possibly that for Cristani. He's got time for 2 more laps if he wants them, if the tyres will let him. So it's possibly more all eyes towards Patrick Qualy and Giacomo Altoe to see what they could do. And Cristani, I would suggest, probably calls it a session with 3 minutes to run. Here, meanwhile, though, comes the pole sitter, Patrick Qualy, out of the bus stop chicane. Now, the middle sector suggests it might not quite be his best lap, and the final sector confirms it. It's, though, still a lap time that would have been good enough to put the Imperiale Racing Lamborghini on pole position, notwithstanding. Now, both Michael Grenier and Giacomo Altoe are on good laps. In the background, Chiva dives into the pit lane, so he is unlikely to improve for 6th. As across the line now comes Altoe, who sets a best lap of the session for him, but does not improve his grid positions. He remains in 5th, 86,000 second adrift of teammate Michael Grenier. Fran Rueda, meanwhile, seems to be losing a whole heap of ground through the middle sector. So he was there or thereabouts in sector 1, 6/10 off through sector 2, which, if nothing else, suggests there's possibly some data conferences needed in the Teo Marti Motorsport garage in the break before the race, just to see what they can do to shift the settings. But again, what we don't know is just how well balanced that car is going to be in race trim, as across the line comes Rueda and doesn't improve, so he remains in 7th position, about half a second adrift of Qualy's pole mark. So Valentin Pierberg, 16th overall, 1.5 minutes remaining in the qualifying period. Giacomo Altoe still feeling he can wrestle a little bit more time from the Emil Frey Racing Lamborghini. Fran Rueda also flashing his headlights at Fabio Anidi, possibly still trying to press onwards. Here is Michael Grenier, 3rd overall for Grenier, just 1/10 of a second adrift of pole position, having leapfrogged ahead of Alberto Di Folco on his last lap. And Altoe, middle sector, giving him nothing. And judging by just the poise of the car of the Canadian, I don't think Grenier is on much of an improvement drive either. And that, more or less, I think is going to give us the grid, because there's nobody else through the field who is looking likely to post improvements, as the clock will have ticked to pretty much 0 by the time that Michael Grenier arrives back into the bus stop chicane and pit area. Giacomo Altoe, meanwhile, has gone past us, so he might be having just one final roll of the dice. For Michael Grenier, is that going to be into the pit lane? Yes, it is. So he pulls off the road as Marcello Hahn heads round to start his 13th lap of the session, just as the checkered flag came out. And it would appear as if Hahn managed to sneak through. So he will squeeze one more lap out of proceedings. The checkered flag is out. Davide Roda, on his last lap session, goes 15th, so a good lap from Roda late on to give him AM class pole position, in fact, over Antonio Coimbra. So a lot to celebrate for Imperiale Racing. Their return to the championship and immediately right to the top of the times, admittedly by just 74 thousandths of a second. So again, a fascinating session to set the grid for this 5th race of the International GT Open season. The top 10 covered by just over 0.6 of a second. Daniel Zampieri, who is in 10th, is through sector 1 on his best lap of the session, so he may yet be able to fashion a slight improvement. Giacomo Altoe also continuing to press on, so we've still got a couple of cars circulating within the top 10. It's Alberto Di Folco, chance to look at him at work through the bus stop chicane. Ditto for Michael Grenier. I think of the two cars still circulating, neither of them looking likely to make an improvement. Second on the grid then for Fabrizio Cristani. And this is an opportunity for he and Miguel Ramos to get back up onto the podium. As Altoe powers past, the commentary box doesn't improve, so he remains in 5th position. As in slow motion, we see pole sitter Patrick Qualy. So the race this afternoon, the green flag at 4:40. But let's now head to the pits and hear from our pole sitter.
Patrick Qualy, first appearance in the GT Open and pole position. You must be happy.
Yes, I'm very happy. Also very pleased with Imperiale. They have done a great job. And this is, like I said, this is a good starting position. The race is still a long way to go. We will try to finish in the same position we started with. And yeah, and tomorrow a new day.
And clearly Spa is always Spa.
Yeah, Spa, I would say my favorite track, without a doubt.
Good. Thank you. All the best for this afternoon.
So a very happy pole sitter. Patrick Qualy then on pole position for Imperiale Racing. Alongside him on the front row of the grid, Fabrizio Cristani. Then on row 2, Michael Grenier and Alberto Di Folco. Championship leader Giacomo Altoe starts in 5th alongside Edward Cheever. Fran Rueda, foremost of the Teo Marti Motorsport runners, in 7th, ahead of Frederick Schandorf, then Martin Kodrich and Daniel Zampieri. Very competitive row 5. To the second half of the field, and all Lazarus Racing, row 6, Nicholas Pola and Fabio Anidi. Kenny Harbold, despite the big spin, up in 14th. Davide Roda, last lap of the session for him, was enough to claim AM class pole position ahead of Antonio Coimbra. Valentin Pierberg then ahead of Giuseppe Cipriani. Janine Hill starts 19th. Jiatong Liang may well not be there after his huge accident at Radion that brought out the red flag. Then Marcello Hahn and Alexandra Traquina, who had a troubled session, but hopefully the HTB Motorsport Mercedes will be there. Make sure that you join us this afternoon around about 4:30 when our coverage will start for the 5th race of the International GT Open season. Until then, it's goodbye from Spa.